All right, well, thanks everyone for coming tonight. This is a bit more than we expected. This is really good to see. Welcome to April CocoaHeads. So, as always, I'd like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Yeah, housekeeping as usual. Hey, I'm Zach, and I help run CocoaHeads along with Christian. Oh, Christian's right here. Any questions, comments, concerns tonight, please come and speak to one of us. Oh, that's meant to be on the slide when I said. As always, a massive thank you to Billu, our sponsor. They help with all our ongoing costs, but also they're our hosts tonight. So by venue and food, we really appreciate that. So thanks to Billu. A reminder that we have Code of Conduct. You can read it in full on the website, but it boils down to a few key points, and they are to be respectful, be inclusive, and be aware. Any questions or issues or concerns about this, please, again, come and speak to myself or Christian tonight, or send us a message later on if you're more comfortable to get in touch that way. Speaking of getting in touch, we have a Slack community. You can join it. It's not too active at the moment, but everyone is welcome to join and start discussions on anything you might want to talk about, sort of iOS related or not. There can be some fun discussions in there sometimes. So who's attending for the first time? Just show of hands. Welcome. Round of applause. I have a few new faces here tonight. So if you like what you see here tonight, you'll probably also enjoy the Melbourne CocoaHeads meetup. They run in a pretty similar format to us, generally with a few talks and some socializing, and they also have an excellent live stream. They run on the second Thursday of the month. We're on the third, so there's always an opportunity to watch that. Right, conferences, what's upcoming? There's Deep Dish Swift in Chicago later this month. It's generally Apple focused. Last I looked, I think tickets were sold out, but there is a wait list. So if you're interested in attending, you can do that. There's also WWDC coming up. I did forget to add a slide, I admit, but that's a big one. And I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that from CocoaHeads over the next couple of months as well. So looking ahead, our May event is here at Billu as normal on the third Thursday as usual, so the 18th. And then in June, we're hoping to have a bit more of a special event around WWDC. So if you've been involved in our WWDC events before, you'll know what I'm talking about. They're generally a little bit bigger, and we sort of do something a little bit special, maybe a bit more than just talks. Last year we did a great panel discussion, and we even had some sort of special dialogue guests as well. That was really cool. We are also looking for a slightly bigger venue for that one. As you can see here tonight, we've got a great turnout, but we're sort of reaching the capacity limits. So if anyone knows of anything, please get in touch with me. I'm happy to talk about that. We're really looking for anything between that 50 and 100 people. That would be great. So yeah, please get in touch. And as always, for future months, we're still looking for talks. So I think next month we're pretty full up, but July onwards, we'll be looking for more. So again, if you'd like to talk or run any ideas by me, feel free to do that. So tonight's schedule, we've just had the housekeeping. I'll stop talking soon, I promise. Our first talk is from Arun on privacy. Then we have a short break, and we're back to talk with Christian on SwiftUI Previews. And then finally, I'll round up the night with another talk. And I should mention that because we have 3 talks and they're going to be quite long, if it gets too late and you have to leave, no problems at all. We won't be offended. All the speakers know that it's people have things to get to, so that's absolutely fine. All right, so before I go, anyone looking for work, or is anyone hiring and wants to give a plug? No one's looking for work, no one's hiring. Yeah. Looking for work or hiring?
Oh no, I'm looking for work.
Do you want to stand up and give a little plug?
Yes. Hi, I'm June. I'm studying at DTS, the Master of Information Technology, and this is my last semester. And I'm looking for the internship. And my major is iOS development. Right?
Nice.
Yes, networking. Thank you.
Very cool. Welcome. And all right, so that's all I have for the housekeeping. I'm going to hand over to Arun now. Thanks,
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Great. All right. Thanks for having me here. Been here after 6 years now. Talking back here. A little bit nervous. Hope I get over it soon. All right. That's me. Big long name. Call me Arun. Too much. I spelled it wrong as well all the time. It's just me. So, what are you? What I'm going to chat about? There's going to be like 3 parts here. First part will be like explaining, taking you through, sharing with you the journey that I went through from 2019. And then the second part would be Lego. I'm still not interested. You can see how I can explain these concepts to non-tech people so that we can bring them along in the journey as well. And also what frameworks that we can give, a simple framework that we can give to the non-tech people to help them to bring along the journey as well. And then I'm going to leave you with some thoughts, my own thoughts, like how can we approach privacy as engineers, and how can we help non-tech savvy people understand privacy. All right, let's get started. Landscape. Yeah, start with the landscape. We need data, right? All our apps need some data to do something. And this data, accessing this data, brings in the privacy risk. And it's not just accessing the data. It's what tech stack we use to access the data also brings in the risks, how we access. Now, it is a bit of a pendulum, right? You need data to be efficient. You need to access your customer data, your users' data to be efficient to help them, right? But also we need to be careful with how much and how we access it also brings in the privacy. So it's a bit of a dance between efficiency and also that the risk. So where do we stand in that? Now, this is something since from iOS 4. If you're following that, you can see this transparency always increasing in Apple platforms. Right from very beginning when the phones access for everything has a prompt there to inform the users, to educate them, so the users can make an informed decision. So this theme is always there. So 2019, that's when the start of this for me, right? So us who's following, doing iOS app development and watching the WWDC for a long time, when they said in 2019, the App Store guidelines that you cannot access IDFA, you can't even reach out to IDFA if your app sits in the kids category, that's a big sign for us. There's something coming out. So I went to work. What work I did? Started to unpack the apps that I was working on. What data it is accessing, where we're storing, how we're storing, how we are transmitting, how we are accessing the data from those devices. And that IDFA is the beast with billion backs, because that ID is what we can call it as a very deterministic ID, because you have less cost to put things together from different applications. All you need is that IDFA. Once you have that IDFA, you can link the behavior in the whole device. So that's why the IDFA is million backs, beast with billion backs. So got to work, got everything in order, where things are accessing, how we are accessing the data, I used to build an analytics, how the data access is done by an analytics layer, and I started to chop them up so that just getting ready so that we can be compliant for this and also for other apps to come. 2020, big thing, transparency. We got these nutrition labels, and they came up. We don't know where our data is going. We are in trouble to fill these nutrition labels. So the work that we did in 2019, when we saw that no idea of access, helped us to fill these labels clearly and help us to explain to our users like what we do, why we do it, and how we do it very clearly. This is a big thing. ADD, app tracking transparency. Right. This is really huge. If you don't have this, you can't access IDFA. But there's one more thing as well, which is around fingerprinting. Fingerprinting is the other IDs that you can collect from your device. Putting together, you can form where the person is. This is my own theory and hypothesis. For example, if you look at the keyboards that I have installed in my phone and where I am from, you can form a profile of me by accessing those informations. And I don't change my device name often as well. I back them up from my previous apps, previous device, so that device name stays the same. So all these things I can put together, and I can form an ID. And this is the hardest one. That fingerprinting is the hardest one to identify how we do it, what they do with that. And the transparency kicked one more notch in 2021. Anyone tried it on your phone? Tried it on it? So you can actually see where the data is going, who are the domains they're accessing, and you can just see it, the transparency, right? And these changes on a platform like Apple makes privacy available for millions to adopt quickly. So the impact is huge for us to be in line for that. We can comply and provide privacy to our users. So this is the journey. With no IDFA on fixed app categories. Transparency, app tracking transparency prompt, privacy report. And recently, we had pre-alert guidelines, which is if we are putting any pre-prompt before this tracking, we should show this tracking straight away as an next screen. If you don't, we are not in line with the guidelines. And that pre-prompt should not have an exit button. So when that pre-prompt is dismissed, this is happening, right? So that's basically gets a consent is happening on the Apple prompts, not in any of our own custom design prompts. This basically just narrows it down, right? This is exciting for a component of privacy advocate. So how did I went about? So that's the first part, right? The landscape and everything. How did I went about to explaining to non-tech people? We use SDKs. We have to. We don't have all the resources to build everything that a MarTech company does. We need to pull the SDK in, throw it in. Yes, business resources are limited. We had to do. And this is what I used. This is the Legos to do it. So the way I explained it to them was, this is how we build our software, right? We build modules, and this is the system frameworks, blue thing, and they give us access to all the underlying IDs underneath. Right? So this is how I explained to them, and I made sure one is the biggest one being the ID of the longest one, the one with the long reach, because that's the deterministic ID. Just pull them up, less cost to identify where the person is. So this is what I used. You got a system framework underneath. You got all these IDs there. Some marketing technology SDKs, some other industry measurement or marketing technology SDKs. And then on top of that, we have our app code actually over there. And that sits on the phone. All right. This is how the stack looks like. All right. So to explain to our non-tech people, because they always go, no, it's a MarTech SDK, it's the one that's accessing this thing. It's not us. It's not us. But they don't see this. They see this. When people are giving access to your app, they're giving access to everything underneath. This is how I went to work and expanding that. So when you have this marketing, say the pink one is the marketing SDK, and if it is sitting on that app everywhere, all right, app A, app B, and you also have app C over there. All right. So when they all have access to that red one, the yellow one is a common one right there, yellow one. So they can just latch onto that service at the back. And that's our profiling. That's our profiling. And that's how they know. It's not listening to you, they're not, because they're accessing by those SDKs. And this is how I went toward explaining this concept that you are, when the access is given, the SDK is running in the same process, so they're all getting the same access. This is how I went to work. And I use that different lengths to say to them why giving access to IDFA is has more impact to the privacy for our users compared to the other things. Yeah, but usually you don't give access to any of that stuff. They ask me. And then I put this framework for them. They want to know, okay, when do I show the data prompt? When do I show them? I put this framework to them as a 4-quadrant diagram. The first quadrant diagram is the API services there, which is our own internal first-party services that we access to get the data out to. That's why our users are there to see the data that we make. And then on the quadrant 4, I got all the identifiable information, the device ID, IDFA, name of the user, email, and all those things you can do. And then quadrant 3, you got the anonymous ID of fee, or even the app instance ID. It's just a simple UID, right? So we'll put these things together. And then I gave it to all the product owners over there. You know what data you are sending, you know where you are sending to the MarTech and all those things. And as soon as it leaves it and reaches one of those data brokers, that's when you got to get the prompt up. So here's your slide. Put that stencil on top of the data that you're sending in, figure it out where it just puts it up. Right, so this is the framework that I gave. You all know what the data brokers is, right? So a data broker, you classify MarTech as a data broker. Like say if you're sending to MarTech a data, some piece of data, let's say I'm buying something, Kohl's or somewhere, right? And if MarTech 2 knows I'm the same person who bought something in Kohl's, the same person who bought the other item in Maya or even Woolworths, somewhere else. So if they are able to put my behavior together in 2 different companies, that's when you're tracking across 2 companies. So that's when you need to put the data out. So the last year WWDC has a video that clearly explains this. So if you want to have a look at it, just have a look at it. It clearly explains it. So that's the framework I gave them. So first thing is you need to know where your data is going. So do a data audit and then take this framework, throw it on top of it, see if you need to put them up or not. All right. Sometimes we don't have the resources to build all the things this MarTech SDKs do. What do? Do a switcher. That's what you do. You let those SDKs think they're accessing IDFA, but they're not. They're getting the medicine that you want. Because Switzerland, throw that in. That's it. I get everything that you got, but at the same time, I won't give you that, what you're asking for. And this also helps me to audit the SDKs as well. So whenever someone asks me to do me, hey, can you throw the SDK in? I put a breakpoint over there. I'll see if it is accessed by IDFA. Because most of them, they don't tell you. They won't tell you. They write all these things in this website that you need to use my SDK. Right? But once you go and figure it out, there are other REST APIs that you could use to send the same data, but you're reducing the data that you was giving it to them. All right, so the SDKs doesn't need all the data that you need. But sometimes we as engineers are forced to use it because we're not given enough resources to do that. And that's when we come up with the switcheroos. Throw them in. But if you do that, document it. Document is like explain to app review. Yeah. Document everything. What do you do? How do you do? Get on a call with them, explain to them, and then they will be okay with it. So just make sure it's there, and make sure you also provide all the other traces. Make sure none of the ID phrase leaking anywhere. Make sure no other data is going out. So just leave it there. Fingerprinting is hard to find. Fingerprinting is very hard to find, but we just need to make sure the contracts that we have with our MarTech technology or whatever it is enforcing that. So it's like we need to make sure that fingerprinting is hard to find. So this is what I did. Now this is the medicine that they're getting, and I'm getting the real Pepsi. All right, so you're switching and giving them always the zeros no matter what they do. All right, get it, have it, yeah, as much as you want, eat as you go as you want. So this is mine, yeah. Final thoughts. How can we measure the privacy? Can we measure it? Most of the times when you speak to someone, like it's always an on-off, right? It's always an on-off situation, on-off switch, right? But it is not. Privacy is not an on-off switch, right? There is a revelatory power when you aggregate data. You keep collecting data, you keep aggregating, you form a picture. There we go. So the person is. So it's not an on-off switch. I'll try and explain this using this metaphor. Right? And I'm trying to come to this concept of obscurity scale. Yeah, how much I can obscure the person. Let's say if I'm going in the morning to my baker, and in the lunch, I'm going to a salad fixer to get my salad. I don't mean French with salad, but just for this purpose, just say it. Usually, salad person. I'm a pure non-vegetarian. Sorry. And then I'm going to the pastry stuff in the afternoon. Yeah, for my afternoon 3 o'clock coffee fix. Yeah, right. If I go in there without any disguise, these 3 people come and tell whether it is me, Arun, who went there to find it out. What if I have some disguise, my skills, my own makeup skills? What do I get? I can still figure it out. What if I have this skills like Sherlock Holmes? And then maybe they can work it out, but the cost is there. The probabilistic ID, that's what they call it, the probabilistic ID, call it. What if I have a magic hook like Moe and keep shifting my shapes? Yeah, go in morning in one shape to my baker. Can they tell me? No, they can't. What if we provide them the scale? That drops the data that we spoke about. So if I go back to the slides, right? If it drops the data, right? If I'm going with no disguise, give them access to IDFA. Yeah, sure, we can have it. If you don't want to, just don't share anything. Go down that scale. Share less data from the device. Share less data from the device. Don't let the data leave the device. Okay, that's exactly it is. Obscurity scale. How much the data has a revelatory power. Use it, combine it, then we can measure the privacy. We can give our users, you want to use this feature, this is where the scale is going to be. You still want to do it. Ask why. Ask the product owners. Ask the people, why do you need this data? To whom we are sending the data? How are we accessing the data? What are the values to the business that is accessing the data? Brings it to us. That also helps us to inform the obscurity scale to our users. Ask why again for the risk. That's it.
Thanks, Arun. Do we have any questions?
I'll take one. So how, working with these metrics companies or tracking companies, how easy is it for them to budge?
How easy it is for them
to change their ways? Convince them that they should not use that data?
Depends on the business model of the company, right?
I know, I believe in Bonnet, some using our fingerprints. So it's
Say it
like,
again, sorry.
so as I know, because I'm not deep into this topic, but as I know, if you use fingerprints, so if you use this service, so Apple could ban your application from App Store.
That's right. Yeah.
And as I know, it's like 96% of United States users say no to share IDFA. So it's like, okay, it exists, but 4%.
Tech is changing, right? So we just need to ask them, what do you want to do? You want recommendations that across all the different devices, across 2 different services? If they say yes, fine. They're okay with that. To walk around with no disguise, It's always really hard because there are business situations that does force you. There are times that you need to ask them like, what's the value? What's the value? So it's not that. Yeah.
So on that fingerprinting issue, is you've got the Switzerland solution to get around, like, and detect and block the IDFA, but if you don't know what they're using as the properties for the fingerprinting, you're not really getting any metric to go. They're figuring out what your hand movement is or what time of day you use it or.
You can't. That fingerprinting is the hardest one to do. What we can do is like if you keep finding these methods like this, it keeps whistling it, giving them zeros to it, like the device IDs and other things keeps whistling it. So we can do our part to, like, it's the way I see it is you need to increase the cost of identifying the person. So with IDFA, it's easy for them to compute who you are. So with fingerprinting and other things, it's actually getting expensive for them. One of the things, like, what if they recycle the IDFA every single month? Firefox put a memo out. Memo is a what do you call it? Petition up to signatures to, like, why don't we just recycle it? And the IDFA does get recycled if you turn on the app tracking transparency, and if you turn off all the things and then turn it back on, it does recycle as well. So it's recycling them so that they can't actually do the tracking, migration, all those things. So but it is hard. It is hard. The way we can do is just just educate, inform them, and that's the part that we can do. And find out where it hurts, right? So, for example, like, if we share this data, is it having any commercial advantage to the competitors, right? Why would I want to give this data to my competitors, right? Because these markets share the data across. Ask them, why do you want to share it? It's our users. You want to monetize it, so don't share it. So that just stays within, right? Other places you can ask about trust, right? Some places trust is the currency. Ask them how hard the trust, if you lose it, how hard it is to work out. So I always work from the bottom line of the company. What's important for the company? Okay. If you want to share the data, you're losing your valuable information that you can monetize by yourself.
All right, another round of applause for it. We'll take a very short break. There's still a bit of pizza left. There's drinks in the fridge. Bathrooms are out in the corridor, and we'll see you back in about 5 minutes. All right, now I'm going to pass over to Christian for his talk on SwiftUI Previews.
Why do I have a say most of the time? Say most of the time.
Christian, they don't. They don't. Just end it right there.
Well, that's the whole point. Thanks for coming. Okay. Well, thanks for coming, everyone. Like, it's a big turnout. We were surprised. Suddenly there was just a bunch of people coming in. Great thing. I'm really looking forward to the June event as well. It's going to be super great. And it's been a while since I talked. Last time I was in Melbourne, doing my server-side Swift talk, and I had this idea about us sort of talk about SwiftUI Previews for a while, because if something has frustrated me building my own apps, oh boy. So yeah. So, but this talk is it's not necessarily gonna be me telling you all the best practices, because I don't know. But it's going to be more me sharing sort of the learnings, the problems I ran into, and what works for me. Some solutions I found that means that I can use with UI previews, you know, for my own app. So I hope that's what you get out of it. Just a quick poll. How many have used SwiftUI only? Not the previous poll. How many have used SwiftUI Previews? Great.
Try to.
So that's about half the room. What are some of the reasons you have not used Previews?
Because it's shit. It's slow. It's really slow.
Faster to just run the app and see there.
Yeah.
I would argue with that, but
Yeah.
let's put it mildly. They haven't been the most stable thing, but really interesting nevertheless. So Apple, in one of their talks from WWDC 20, said they don't have the speaker, but so Xcode Previews help you write SwiftUI code, edit your views in multiple configurations at once, quickly test all of your changes, but previews benefit your app as a whole. By structuring your app to make it more previewable, you make your app more understandable, more testable, and more maintainable. Do we agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. The energy is just mind. So I would say SwiftUI Previews are a fantastic addition to our toolbox when you build with SwiftUI. But I feel like it's also more than just a preview. So I talked to Craig and Balash about it, and it is sort of what we know as hot reloading, more or less. Like you make some changes in your view, and it just instantly reflects it when it works. And you can see your changes immediately. You don't have to recompile. You don't have to build it. You don't have to navigate to the button where you have it. It's really convenient when it works, and you can even interact with them. I mean, you all know that. You know, you've got the preview in SwiftUI and Xcode, and you can see the changes. But you can also swipe and tap buttons and things. It potentially is a really cool tool. So it's good to see that a lot of you know it. It's about half the room. So I'm going to go through a couple of the basics just to maybe, I don't know, inspire you a bit or bring back the energy. So obviously, as I said, previews, you see them, it's called the cameras, I believe. Yeah. So you see it on sort of the bottom or right side of your Xcode. If you start a new project, they'll give you a little sample view and you can see, I mean, obviously this is all SwiftUI. So you've got a content view, the little image and text, and then in the bottom, there's a preview where you specify, I want to preview this view. And then it shows that in Xcode. That's pretty cool, right? And then from there, there's a lot of modifiers that you can add to it. So the first one would be, how does my view look in dark mode? So you go in and add, the text size, okay, but you go in and add preferred color scheme dark, and then it turns dark. So wait, okay. So a preview is pretty much like any other view. It is literally just a view that is being displayed and it shows some other view. So you don't actually see it, but it also means that you can do, the vast amount of modifiers you can use on views. You can also use those on previews. So for example, you can change the padding, you can change the font color, you can change the font, you can use dark mode, whatever. So you can really quickly test how your view looks in lots of different kinds and really quickly iterate over some changes, which I think is just cool. Recently, I'm not sure which Xcode 14.2 or 3, they also added the option to use, sorry, I'm being ahead of myself. You can also specify what device you want that preview to run on or what sort of device you want it to view. So in this case, we can specify an iPad mini, and then you'll see if I go back, you can see the device sort of turns into the iPad. And you can also change the name of a preview. So if you see in that upper right corner, it right now just says content view, but you can go in and add a title or display name and name whatever you want. Might be easy if you've got a lot of previews, you can find the one that you're looking at. And again, so in Xcode 14 something, they added support for viewing in landscape or any interface orientation. So that's pretty cool. And as I mentioned, previews, I think where they come to their power is, sure, you can see what your view and app looks like quickly. But like the alternative would be to launch up your app. And let's say we want to test 3 different buttons that are on 3 different screens, or you would have to like go to navigate back, navigate in, back. Like it's really cumbersome. So instead, what you can do with previews is, for example, if you're implementing accessibility and you want to check the screen size or the text size on your view at the same time, see if it looks correct, does it truncate, does it wrap, what does it do? Like instead of having to go into your settings and change the font size, etc., you can quickly hook up to the environment dynamic type size it's been renamed to. And then down in your previews, you can add like a VStack and have several. And then you can go in and add a specific type size for each. And then you can quickly see how your, in this like a button or text or whatever looks in that size. Check that it looks good. So far so good. You can also, this is actually something I dislike about the newer versions of Xcode. So before, when it launched in 2020, when you added a group, it would actually sort of show each preview in a separate, I don't know, window, let's call it that. But here now they're starting to, instead of having this little sort of tab bar menu thingy where you can toggle between the ones you want to see. And I mean, it's good. It lets you see the whole view at once, but it's really hard. It's like now you have to tap between it to compare. So I guess there's a lot of feedback yet to be processed. Right. So let's say that we're editing a view of a cell that represents a stock. So this is the code from my own project, Stocky. And in this case, I'm going to show you how to sort of pin a view. So the use case here is that you have some view or a screen, but there's an element there that you'd like to change and see how does this, if I change this little element, the green box in this case, how does that actually look in the context of my entire cell? And again, we can do that. So let's go into the, yeah. So you tap this little pin button up in the right, and it pins the view. And then we can jump over to the specific little green view that I have, which is a separate view. And let's say that, sorry, we've got that. And then as you see up in the menu, we can now toggle back to the original cell view that we had. And this is now pinned, but you'll notice that the code is still the same as before. It's hard to say, but it's the same. So we're editing only the green box, but we're viewing the entire cell. You get it. And if we add, like, let's say we want to make it bigger, we want to make it blue, we can make those changes, but instantly see it in the context of that entire cell or entire table view, like whatever. And I think that's really, really useful because that's, seeing how that box or square in itself looks is great, but you really want to see it in the context of where you use it. So I'd say it's a really useful tool. It's also really, really powerful. So as I said, SwiftUI, a preview is just like, it is just a view. So whatever you can do in a view, you can also preview, obviously. So you're not really limited to just simple things. Let's say you've got a chart or some drawing code, you can get that viewed in your preview as anything else. Let's say you've got a lot of little composable views and you would like to see, or again, you've got a lot of configuration. So in my case, I've got a group of many, many different variations where, depending on that number, there are more of these flames lit up. So I can quickly sort of toggle and check, have I covered all cases? What if it's full? What if it's empty? Does it look right? Does it fill them up from them? So you can check the logic really, really quickly for a lot of different conditions, I guess. So again, and the alternative here would be to, change the number in your code or data, boot up the app, see where it is. Okay, it looks good. Okay, change the number, boot it up. Let's see what happens. It's very time consuming. Likewise, if you're working on some charts or some, again, specific drawing code or whatever, some shapes, you can really work in the details and quickly iterate. And again, as I mentioned, test out, I've got a selection of buttons that show up in different places of the app, but I can quickly see how they look compared to each other. How does it look when one is pressed and one is not? It's just super quick to iterate. And previews can also show an entire screen, because in SwiftUI, a view can be anything. A screen is also just a view wrapped in something else. So you can quickly see how a whole screen looks. And with the help of live previews, again, as I mentioned, you can interact. So you can tap the buttons, you can write in the text field, you can see what happens, how does it navigate, all from within Xcode. Like, you don't need to boot up a device or simulator at all. That was the problem. All good, right? I have run into so many of these. Preview can't be displayed, cannot preview this file. Preview's crashed. You have put a line somewhere that I don't like, and I'm gonna crash your machine. Like, it was endless. And it wasn't until recently, or I think late last year, that I watched the talk from WWDC 20. Yes, I must have missed that, where it really, occurred to me I've been doing it wrong all along. So, I mean, when I created my indie apps, it was right when SwiftUI came out, and I thought, this is a great new technology. How quickly could I build my app and iterate and all that? And I really started to sort of think, I want to do everything in previews, sort of first, make sure it works. But it does take a little bit of work to set up previews. You don't, it is sort of an extra view you have to write for each view you do. And it is extra work. So if you want to get something out quickly, you maybe just build the app and test it on device, etc., as you're used to, and then think, we'll add it in later. And then by that time, you've got yourself down so many rabbit holes and so many incorrect coding patterns that, when you start implementing previews, this is what you get. And no fault to Apple, because they have sort of instructed you how to do it. But especially in the early years, you got an error message, go away. Like, you could not use it for anything useful. Definitely that has been much, much better lately. So the whole talk is about making your app or views previewable. And it all comes down to basically like how you work with your data. So, and credit to Apple for this drawing. I did not do that, it's too pretty. You want your views to only work and know about the simplest form of data as possible. So that would be the items in red, because that's kind of also what your users interact with. Like, they don't interact with your core data model. They interact with a button, with a text, or write it in a text field. So somehow we need to convert our data into things that eventually will be easily displayed in a view. And that means, like, if you have a core data model like I do, for example, you don't want to put that in your view. You want to sort of transform all things into simple strings, simple numbers, whatever. And then that's going to bring you a lot of the way. And then the question then is, when do we do that? So when in the view hierarchy do we actually sort of shape this data into what you want? And as a general rule of thumb, the sooner we do it, the better. The more reusable and testable and previewable the app could potentially be. And I know it's hard now to believe, but the whole point is to make previews helpful, right? But it does require a little bit of pre-thinking, a little bit of work. Luckily, it's the same concepts and things that we've been saying for UIKit for years. Make your view simple. Don't put all kinds of things. Use view models. All that. But why we just don't do it? So it's the same learning, but I don't know. Maybe we finally have a chance to do it. So yeah, the lesson is make your views as small as possibly and basic as possible. And on top of that, try to compose all of your very, very small things into bigger ones when you need to. Pass data through from one simple data to the from the, you know, I don't know, the big view, and then create smaller ones based on that. And I've found that this will give you the fewest problems in your previews. And that comes down to using lots and lots and lots of primitive types, Booleans, simple image, string, date, whatever, instead of these heavy objects that the view doesn't even need. Like the view doesn't need to know that your data comes from a CloudKit record or a managed object or some realm database object or something that's really complex. It just needs to know what text do I need to show, what happens when you tap the button, what image is this, that's all. Like, and they should not have to look into like nested properties of view models and like networking and all that. They just need to show this text. Okay, done. So the way we go about that is there's a few options in views. So speaking about immutable inputs, which is things that the view has or gets that it cannot change. And that would, you know, I don't know, where you start is probably some sort of let or constant, right? So in this case, I've got a add to watch list button, and it's connected to a specific symbol, like a stock ticker code. It has a text and it has some sort of action. And that's all that needs to work. And to create a preview for that then becomes super, super simple, because all you need is to provide a string, and a closure, which could be nothing. Easy, and you get a preview, and that works. So, right. What wasn't so easy, which is one of the rabbit holes I got down and then figured out later, how do I create a preview for this? You can still get caught. So for example, I'll admit that. If you don't use these primitive types, you are going to get into trouble eventually. So for example, on the left, I've got a view, a watch list stock cell that it does have a view model. I'm not saying this is good code, by the way. It does have a view model, but you initialize it with a CD stock, which is core data stock, one of my managed objects, and then it creates a view model based on that, etc., lays out the views. Not great. It does work, you know, when you run it, but how do you then create a preview from that? So that's what I have on what I try to do on the right side. So you see, I want to create a preview with my stock cell, but then I have to specify a core data stock or core data entity. And how do I do that? You don't. You shouldn't. It's not. I mean, you can, but you don't need to. Like, give it just the most basic information that you need. That's one thing. The view doesn't need it to actually do what it needs to display, but it also, if you do it like this, then your view becomes very tightly coupled to that specific CD stock class. It becomes tightly coupled to managed objects. It becomes tightly coupled to core data. So if one day you want to abstract or change that to something else, well, you know. So yeah, you don't need that. And it also makes this view pretty much non-reusable. Like, it has one specific case and it does it, sure, but you know, it's not testable, it's not reusable. And it goes against the concept of, you know, compositional programming. So how do we fix that? So what we really want is to just give it that basic piece of information that it needs. We need a name, a price, and maybe an image or a change, whatever. I've left out a few of the things here, just make it simple. And that gives us that we can create a preview like in the top right. We give it a string, we give it a price, maybe no image. Boom, we got a preview. And that's just so much easier to work with. And then you can sort of compose these smaller things to bigger ones, following the same principles. Roll on. view models in SwiftUI certainly have their place, and I would. It's a fantastic way to take some complex model or object or whatever we call it, transform it, shape it into outputting just those basic pieces of information that the view takes. I'm not recommending it. I'm not saying you shouldn't. It works. It's a good model. It's been around for many, many years. You'll probably find it easy to use. And it's a good way to abstract all the logic, all the details from the view itself into, so it again just has that basic, just present this data. And the side effect is that, you know, your logic then also, even if you're just formatting a number, it also becomes much easier to test on the right side. And because I generally think you shouldn't have any logic in your views. You can of course have like, if it's this state, then use this color, and then, but even that you could abstract. So like I would like to suggest that you keep your views as tiny as possible. But yeah, again, the point is don't have logic or rich data in your views if you can avoid it. And yeah, so again, to write a preview for that, with the view model, now we just need to, you know, pass in that view model with a number or whatever. And again, we're good to go. So that covers sort of things that don't change. But what about the things that do change? So state is fairly easy because it should be private and contained within the view itself. So it already can create it, change it, whatever. It's not readable from the outside. It shouldn't be. So you shouldn't run into problems there. And they work in your previews. You can initialize them as any other variable. You can change them in your previews. That shouldn't cause you any problems. The other one that we can work with is bindings. So bindings, I'm sure you know, is where you pass in some data from somewhere else that the view can access and change, but it doesn't own it. So it means that when we want to build a preview, we also need to pass in that data. And there's two ways of sort of working with that. So either we can use a constant binding, which just provides some value, and then the view is presenting that, which is good. Or we can, if we want to have a preview where you can actually also, you know, in the live preview, change that binding. Let's say it's a slider. You want to see how it slides. I have another technique for that. So binding with a constant is really, really easy. We've got, again, this add to watch list button, and up in the top there, we've got a binding is added Boolean. So if the button is, or if that particular stuff is already added, we show one state of the button, and if it's not, it's another one. And so the preview is just the VStack of both those options. So the top one is one where we've added this constant false, and then we have one in the bottom where it's constant true. So I can see both the states of my button with this binding, and yeah, so I can see all the possible variations here. I know it's really small for people in the back, but we're happy to talk afterwards if that's okay. So that's pretty straightforward. But I think when you, at least when you have a button or something interactive, you want to be able to change and then see, well, what does it do when I change it? Maybe you want to, I don't know, maybe you're playing around with an animation and you want to see how does that animate when I tap and untap. Who knows? So, aha, I knew I had a mistake somewhere. Title is wrong, disregard that. So a binding without using the constant requires a little bit of, I don't know, magic. No, it requires an intermediate view. So again, we've got the two previews. The top one is again with a constant, just to show the difference. And then the bottom one, I'm previewing a preview intermediate. And that is this view. So essentially, when you want to interact with the binding, you need some sort of super view that owns that, which you can modify, right? So what you do is you create a little intermediate view. You can call it whatever you want, and then in there you add a state with the sort of the same contents and your binding, and then in that body here, you create the view you actually want to preview, pass in the state as your binding, and then in this case, you can add a closure as well. And this means that when we preview, it's actually this view that you see over here. And because it now has a state, the live preview thing will be able to react to that, and that reflects your binding. And again, we're good to go. So yeah, so that's the point here. So now we've got this view. The bottom one is now tappable, and if we tap it, we can see, I mean, could have done it live, but the button changes and we can test that that interaction works. So I would say previews are pretty powerful. Then we come to using the environment and environment objects. Now, I actually already showed this in case of environment. Who can remember what that was? Text size? Yeah. Yeah. So I made a little, okay, let's be honest. I ripped off an example from the WWDC talk where we have a little view that displays some sort of cloud syncing status label, whatever. In your settings, you can see, well, when was the last time my data was synced, or are you offline, whatever. And here we run into a familiar friend. Cannot preview in this file. So in this case, we are using this environment object, cloud sync status that we're passing in, and based on that status, which is an enum, we want to show like a different SF symbol, different text, different color, whatnot. But the preview is not working. And that was a very common, I don't know, confusion when I built my app, because it's hard to figure out what's wrong when it's not there, right? Because you're missing to add something. So it was hard to sort of look at it in a new language and say, what's missing here? But eventually you figure it out. So, and that's where the error messages are way, way, way better now, because now it actually says, preview is missing environment object cloud sync status. Oh, okay, so I'm missing something. And by adding that environment object to our preview, we can now go in and specify, okay, which status do you want to display this for? We can pick something like online, and we've got our preview again. So when you use the environment objects, you need to remember to specify them in your preview view. And like before, let's say I want to preview all the states, the possible states that we can have. You know, we just add a VStack with all three. We pass in the three different statuses in each sort of environment object thing. And again, we can quickly iterate and see all the possible combinations at once. And if you're really smart, you can also in previews use for each. So for example, enums have an all cases property if you conform to case iterable. Yeah. And so instead of writing each one separately, you could just do a for each over all cases preview with this status before. So whenever you add a status, you don't need to update the preview, or you get it. So yeah, be aware when you work with environment objects. This one you might see a few times. It's another example where I think the point is that it's easy to forget, but all previews run in the simulator behind the scenes. So it's actually sort of running real just runtime. And previews can crash too. Like if you forget, if you forget an environment object, that's a runtime crash. So that will also happen in your preview. But if you see this, you know that will also happen in my app. So again, you can catch things early by using previews, which is pretty cool. And yeah, so you must always pass in your environment objects. Otherwise, I mean, they need to be in the view hierarchy to be used. And if you don't, you'll get a crash. When you do, you're back up running. So it's a pretty easy fix in this case. You just add that one line for whatever you're missing. But I would still go back to So this is older code of mine, and it kind of goes against what I've been saying, because I said, give the view the most like specific, simple data you can. And now we're sort of passing in an entire, in this case, like a storage object of, or a database or whatever. So again, this works. It's viable. I'm not saying you should do this necessarily. Maybe you want to have a view model in between. I don't know, work with it, figure it out on your own, see what works. But yeah, be aware that if you forget to include that, it might crash. And yeah. So again, the point comes back to, if you're doing something, see if there's some simpler way you can do it. I would say like the environment and environment objects, they absolutely have their place. They are a really good way to, in the case of environment, that's mostly system parameters like text size, dark mode, orientation, maybe all kinds of things. You can create your own as well, but they're really, really like central to the entire device or system. Environment objects is more like for your own good. I would compare them a little bit or treat them like singletons in that they have their use, but use them sparingly and try to, shape the data instead and give the view just those simple bits that it needs. Great. Given that my apps use core data and also CloudKit, that was a common thing as you saw before. I had a view where I was trying to pass in some sort of managed object, and it's not the best practice, but I found ways to make it work if you want to. And these learnings sort of also translate well into your unit testing. If you want to separate and provide some mock core data, then that can work as well. So one of the key things is if you are, or when you're running your unit tests, for example, or when you're working in your previews, you can ask the persistent container to use a in-memory store type, which means it doesn't read anything from the disk, makes it faster. You start from a clean slate and you don't write anything that gets persisted once you quit the app. And the way you do that is to go down and specify store type in as in-memory store type, and then you pass it a place where it puts that database. And if you're a little bit familiar with Linux, you know that /dev/null goes absolutely nowhere. So it just goes in the bin when you're done with it. So how do we use that in previews though? So one of the things that Apple introduced when they added SwiftUI was also this concept of preview content. So in your project, if you created one, I guess in the last few years, you might have this folder already called preview content. And that's a really great place to put any assets like images, sounds, whatever, any code or anything else that you want to use in your previews, but not want to package with the actual app. So that's a great place to place all your sample data, images, things like that. And to work with core data and previews, what I did, or one of the things I did was so I have these store objects, which is basically like an adapter between my database and, get this data for me, write this data. So it turns my data model into sort of a more easy to use model. So what I did was I pass into my previews as an environment object, but if you pass in your real object, then it will need to go down to the disk. It will take out the actual data that's there. And if you've got like some sort of login system or some way of authenticating to that data, then you've got to go through all those hoops as well. So what I found was that you can create like a preview store and use that in-memory database. Then you go in and you can call your store. For example, I've got a method called add new entry. So you can go in and add test data delete, and then you return the store. and you use that in your preview. So we prepared that. Then coming back to, it's a different view. So I've got a file number choose file view that has this environment object in it, same as before. And then in the preview, we now have this static variable called file number store.preview that loads this sort of pre-formatted data for me. So the shared benefit there is, it's in memory, it doesn't go anywhere, so it doesn't exist when you stop the preview. You've got full control over what is in that database. And so what if you want, we had this example from before, right? We have this view that I initialize with some specific init managed object. So what you can also do is you can go in and create in your preview content. I can create like a preview CD stock that you, so it's basically like a tuple, and you go in and you specify, or you connect to your core. It's the same principle, like would be your persistence thing in memory database. You go in and create, like you would in your regular code, you create a new entity with that context, give it the properties, and then you return that with the context. So that means in this view, where we had that CD stock, we can now make that preview by passing in that preview CD stock.value, and also tell the environment I need to use this context. And then when that runs, the app or the preview will sort of create that and initialize that on, and you're able to see the preview again without doing too much refactoring to get rid of that value. So that was I guess it's like a middle way between the right way to do it, but it got my previews working and it's pretty good. So yeah. I think the point is that obviously previews are super helpful when you do it right, and you can actually preview live your entire app if you sort of follow these principles all the way down and iterate and have your entire app running in the preview window without ever having to use the simulator or anything like that. Something that's pretty cool is that you can also run your previews on your device. So you can quickly, we talked about this, Balash and I, like it's a little bit less common now that everyone is working from home or remotely or whatever. So I remember in the old days that, you were in your office with your designer or product owner or whatever, and you would make your changes and deploy, build on device, go over, walk. We did that back then, yeah. Give them the device, hey, play around with this. And then they would say, okay, you can change that. Okay, you go back. And you would just iterate over that. It's not that useful anymore to run that on your device for that purpose. You can still see how it looks, but it's still really cool. So basically you can, pick that as a destination. You can run your preview, you can unplug, and it will have all that. You can walk around and show it to everyone. Really cool. A second point is that previews are not just for SwiftUI views. And I know there's a few question marks. Okay, maybe not. That's fine. So basically, I'm sure you know that SwiftUI views, previews are only for SwiftUI views. Okay, sure. But with the help of UI view representable, you can wrap a UI view in a SwiftUI view and therefore put that in a preview. So if you've got an app that's sort of full UI kit with a few tweaks and things, you can actually use previews with that. Pretty much out of the box, again, if you have some really simple views or have followed those principles as well. So it's not too far away. And that might really help you a lot in one day transitioning to SwiftUI. So I don't know, maybe that helps. So everything circles back down to the principle of keeping it simple. Don't try to overcomplicate it. Don't try to be smart. It will probably end up hurting in the end, or require extra work or crashes or things you have to dive deep into the forums or logs and whatever. And I would say it's better to take that little extra time and, I don't know, make it right. Get your like the ideal scenario for me would be, you know, you have a fresh plate, you build your first tiny view, make sure the preview works. You add on top of that, make sure the preview works. Because then you keep building up and have something that works. I know it's going to be super tricky to take an existing app and then, okay, we want to have previews everywhere. That's going to take some time. But if you do it, you know, in those steps over time, I think it will be a really, really useful tool. And yeah, as I mentioned, I took some inspiration from these talks from a few years ago. I think they're really good. There are many, many SwiftUI and Previews talks, but these two were really good and eye-opening. And I'm happy to take questions, but I'd actually rather ask the room, what's your best SwiftUI Preview tip?
Just when I start to work with new functionality, because usually it's like up to 10 screens, some data on the background, so it's better. No, I don't. Okay. So it's best practice, which I pick from my friends, just build separate app. It will save a lot of time because it will preview will work instantly. Otherwise, it's like you start preview, 2 minutes later, okay, I can't do this. Okay. Yeah, so that's why it's like here is immediate, at least if it's wrong, so I immediately see, okay, it's wrong, so I fix this. So otherwise, it's like 2 minutes, and I don't know, will it be successful or not? So this is one practice.
I heard they started selling M2 Max now if you have that problem.
But what I expect from Apple knows that, okay, you're using these objects, so those objects use these data for input. If it's too long, so just tell me, show me the metric. So it's like it's too long, make it shorter. So because for me, it's not visible. So am I correct one with all the LEDs? Or is it like a very long chain of calls? So just show me this. I'm happy to improve, but just I don't know. It's invisible.
We're definitely still on journey. Like it is fairly new, right? And there's a lot of maturity, but we've come a long way.
And also because and just the last one. So also, you know, the medical service is very good. So people become older, so they have a bad vision. And in last 2 projects, so the issue was with large text, and they have a beautiful button, which is like a 6 something. There's and the 6 something will show the same preview with all the font size. And this one really helpful because the largest one will look 100%. It will look wrong until you do some couple of minor tricks. Yeah.
It's just a really quick way to find that out, right?
Excellent talk, Christian. One comment on tips and one question for you. On the tips bit, it hasn't improved in 14.3, is you can make the most minor error in something inside of you, and the syntax parsing will just throw an error at the top. Completely misleading. If you get that, the really quickest way is comment out the bit you're working on, just put in a text hello world and work backwards and just introduce the tiniest 1-line change at a time, and that will help you debug something.
When has that not?
But I was curious. I was curious about how you do the preview on a device. I've not seen that. So it's
right.
It's a special button there.
Yeah. So it's not super clear. So when you have your Xcode, and you have your preview on the right, so it will actually use the device unless you specify. It will use the device that you have currently selected as like your simulator run destination thing. So if you select your device there and tap, you don't tap play, but there's like a
local simulator,
there's like
matching device.
there's like a device plugin button on the preview inspector thing. You tap on that and it sort of builds on. Yeah.
Can you actually walk around with it or can you unplug your phone?
Yeah, you can unplug and it'll stay as it was. Yeah.
How does it stay on your phone? Like,
Or it installs the app.
Yeah, it's installed the app,
Yeah,
which is called Preview App.
Yeah.
is there a previous app? That's what I'm asking.
No, it
Yeah.
installs sort of a preview
So it's
app
automatically installed.
with
by
just
default.
that, just that one
Yeah.
page.
You're gonna end up with.
And there is a
more
button.
No, I think
No,
it's
it's probably just one with the same name.
You connect your phone.
App that you're working on.
No, because I probably have a special preview
Button
name.
is
Right, okay.
used, and
It doesn't
will
have the same
install
bundle
with the
ID or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like when you run UI test, it will install like a UI test run.
Do you know how you have multiple tabs for different previews? How that works on device?
Multiple tabs.
You were showing like you can
Oh,
have multiple
In the
previews.
simulator, yeah.
Yeah.
It used to be a whole bunch of views. Now it's text. Oh, little
Yeah,
buttons.
the group ones.
Depending
How
on-
that translating to the device? How do you have multiple previews?
Ah, good
Probably
question. I don't know. Oops. Maybe it just takes the first one and
It's
Yeah.
not the selected one. The currently active one is what.
right, yeah, okay, because you actively build sort
When
of
you
build.
switch between the tabs, it reveals it.
Yeah, so it takes the currently selected one. Okay, I think last question then.
I got a tip and a question. First tip is sometimes you'll have build scripts for maybe like uploading debug symbols and stuff. You can actually put in like a little if statement that says if it's a preview, don't run this because they will all run every time you run previews.
Yeah.
And it can take longer. And which leads to my question, do you have sometimes it takes like 2 minutes to build. Do you have any tips on
Yeah, buy an
debugging
M2.
preview builds?
M3.
So specifically, do I have any tips on making previews build faster? Is that sort of
Yeah.
keep them simple and small? I mean, that's the whole point, right? If you have a super small view, it has less to build. And in my experience, I've got a fairly old machine. It doesn't take 2 minutes, so.
Is it compiling the whole app to get the preview?
It is.
Why is it so?
Yeah, it is.
It's why the first time it's absolutely terrible and it's taking
And
2
then it's
minutes.
really quick.
Even if you have an M2, it takes 2 minutes the first time you download a project and you get started.
Balash?
Another solution for that, if you can, and you have your all the styling and colors and everything in a package. Move out all your primitives which you are used into a package. And you can switch the target and it will look like this.
And that is a great transition into upcoming talks because I know Balash is dying to make a talk around that at some point in July. So if you want that, reach out to him. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Zach.
You made up.
Okay.
Yeah. Have thoughts on preview. It's interesting. But I'm not going to be talking about any code now. So this talk is called So You Built an App. And so I want you to imagine that you've just finished writing an app. You're the only person who's seen it. It's brilliant because nobody's had the opportunity to criticize it yet. But now, you're right. Now you're ready to share it with people. So the code works, but what comes next? I think it looks a little bit something like this. We archive a project, upload it to the App Store, go back and forth with app review a few times. There's a few steps that I'm probably missing here. Profit, success, happy days, you're done. No, not quite. Not quite. So there's a little bit more to it than that. And that's what this talk is about. So this talk is not technical. It's not about the code. We're going to be talking about sort of the stage between finishing your project or writing the code and getting it into your customers' hands. So firstly, we'll talk about what your customers expect from the app, and then things worth considering before you launch. Now, these are things that may or may not impact your customers directly, but just things that you have to do in the lead up to a launch. So who am I? Very briefly, I'm Zach. I run CocoaHeads along with Christian, as most of you would know. It's been a while since I've given a talk, so I'm actually quite excited. Day to day, I do contract work for various clients, sort of large and small. I don't often get to talk a lot about that work, especially on like a public platform like this, but the work I can talk about is my side projects, and so that's absolutely what I'm going to do today. Mostly theoretical, not a lot about the projects themselves, but just very quickly. So one of the things I work on is an app called Petty, and it's an app for helping Australian motorists find real-time fuel prices. Now, it's been around since about 2017, and in that time, it's undergone many refreshes, had tons of new features added. It looks very different from when it started to today, and it actually looks a little bit different from these screenshots. These are just the last time I did a bunch of like marketing things, and that was a few versions ago. one of the things with Petty is that it tries to be the best iOS app it can be. So that means doing things like having an Apple Watch app, Siri shortcuts, widgets, both on the lock screen and the home screen, things like that. When it was new, it was one of the only apps that had this kind of information, but now there's a variety of sources you can get it from. So it's one way to differentiate the app. And the result today is it's many years of incremental change and listening to features that are suggested by users. And building it has taught me a lot. It's been a good project. So today, actually, I launched a new app. It's a new project I've been working on. It's called Glucomate. It looks a little bit like that. That's some screenshots. But what is it? Well, it's an iOS app for people who track, monitor or record their blood glucose levels with HealthKit. It launched today, you already know that. And it has to cater for two use cases. So there's customers who might import their levels sporadically, and that might be people who manually check their blood sugar for various reasons, may or may not have diabetes. People monitor their blood sugar for other reasons. And then there's also people who might have a continuous sensor that sends readings to their phone or to another device continually throughout the day, and that generates a lot of data. The crux of the app is to summarize this information with beautiful charts and summaries of that data, as well as having really good historical data. And one of the features that I'm most proud of is a fully featured demo mode. So a lot of people, or most people I'd say, wouldn't record their blood sugar. But if you want to download the app and check it out, you can with a demo mode that generates completely mock data and puts it in the app, and you can get a feel for all of the features. And I think that's pretty cool. So a little bit about the project. I actually started in 2018, but it's been worked on very slowly. And for most of that time, I haven't been working on it. I've restarted the whole Xcode project process multiple times. I think the only code that's come across is the HealthKit fetching code, because that hasn't needed to change other than having an async await wrapper a couple of years ago. But really, I think the last time it started fresh was when SwiftUI was announced. And then more recently, when Swift Charts was introduced, that was the motivation for finishing it off, because the app worked, you could see all the data, but it didn't look good. And it was very much at that point just designed for me to use. And I was using it, but it wasn't in a point, in a stage that I could give it to a customer and feel comfortable about it. And so why build it? Well, I've had type 1 diabetes for over 20 years. And for the last 5 or 6 of those years, I've had a continuous glucose monitor that I mentioned before. And that device writes data to HealthKit pretty much every 5 minutes, all day, every day. So I have a lot of data in HealthKit, and there's not a lot I can do with it. Surely there's some value to it, but if you open it in HealthKit, it has some nice displays for recent data, but if you want to find information about last week or last month, you're going to be scrolling through a list of readings. And when you have readings going in every 5 minutes, that's almost 300 readings a day. So it's going to take you a while. And yes, the manufacturers of these glucose monitor devices do provide this as a service, but it can be clunky to get data out of them. So in the case of the one I use, you have to navigate to a separate app, which is different from the one they use for your real-time information, generate a PDF report, which is very awkward to look at it on a phone. And I often find myself needing to email it to myself to look at it on my Mac. And it's a clunky process. And Glucomate can offer a lot of the same charts and information, but you have that access to that information in a second. You open the app, it processes it, and it's there. All right. So as I mentioned at the top, this talk isn't about Glucomate as such, but it is about the things that I've had to go, things I've learned, things I've gone through the last couple of months in getting it ready for launch. I haven't added a lot of new features, but it's been about 6 weeks of side project time, getting it to a point of hey, this works, or I think it's good, to I'm comfortable releasing it. So to go back to where we were before, we have an app, the code works, things are good. But what do our customers expect? You've been chipping away at this, in your spare time, and you think it's good. You've only got an iPhone app, and there's a lot more to it than just a few pixels on your iPhone screen within the context of your app. So we're going to go through all the points on the last slide, as well as other things that you need to consider to get ready for launch. Like I said before, some of these are customer-facing things, others are not. They're just things that you have to consider. They might not all apply to every single app, but these are definitely the things that I've had to go through, and maybe one or two will stick out to you as being something new that you haven't thought of before. So to go over the customer expectations first, we need an app icon. It's pretty obvious, self-explanatory, but an app needs an icon. And while you're developing, I know I'm notorious for this, I'm happy to look at a white square that, that's an outline. Like it's fine, it doesn't bother me, but in order to put it into people's hands through test flight or even to submit to the App Store, you do need that icon. And so it's important to come up with an icon. And even if you could get it through test flight review with a blank icon, no one wants to look at an app that is plain and boring. Now, accessibility is another customer expectation. Everyone should be able to use your app. There's a couple of key considerations that, so the low-hanging accessibility fruit that you can tick off first to get there for launch day. Dynamic type and voiceover support probably the big two. And support doesn't have to be perfect, but it should work. Now, in the case of Glucomate, dynamic support check. Voiceover there, it's limited. I'm still working on it, but good enough to ship a 1.0. Now, another thing that customers expect from a modern iOS app anyway is an Apple Watch app. So especially for data-heavy apps or for apps that center around quick action, this is almost essential. Now, you don't have to put the whole app into the Apple Watch app, but the main functionality or sort of key features should be there. And it's also a thing that probably not a lot of your customers are going to use, but from what I've found with Petty is the ones who really like the Apple Watch, they really like it. And they will email you, they will ask for features, and they will thank you when you add them. They do appreciate it. It is definitely a minority, but they feel passionately about that. And they might be your biggest users, so you don't necessarily want to neglect that. So in the case of Glucomate, the two functions that you can do in the Watch app are quickly inputting a reading, which is very handy. That's a feature I use semi-regularly. I don't prick my finger that much, but when I do, it's great to be able to quickly input it there, especially if my phone's not around. And then you can also view sort of a summary of today's data. You can't go into the historical data. You can't sort of look into detailed analysis or trends or anything like that. But these are sort of the two key functions that you might want to perform quickly on your wrist. Now, another thing that customers might expect from your app today is the ability to customize or personalize the application in some way. So I've noticed this is a bit of a trend in popular apps recently. They're allowing more thorough customization. One of the great examples of this that I find anyways is Carrot Weather. It's a weather app that basically allows you to build the weather app that you want. There's a million different configurations. My version of the app can look very different to your version of the app. And I think weather is such a personalized thing, and to be able to customize it to your own taste is very important. And I guess there's the element of a user is just more inclined to like your application if they feel like they can make it their own. So what do I do in Glucomate? Well, you saw the cards and the charts and stuff on the main screens. You can hide the ones you're not interested in, and you can also adjust the order of the ones that you are and bring the most relevant information to the top. It's pretty basic, but it does the job, and it does allow you to customize the app. Just because I care about something and put it at the top doesn't mean that all the customers are. Now, biometric security is another one. It's pretty common these days for apps to have access to personal or sensitive information, or to have an app that, for whatever reason, you need to log into regularly or put a password in before you do certain functions. It's generally expected amongst iOS users anyway that they can get into access parts of your app using their face or their thumbprint or whatever biometrics their device has. It can be pretty annoying to continually have to put in passcodes, and just scanning a face or something does take a little bit of the pain away. Now, I don't do any of this in Glucomate just yet. I don't know if the data is sensitive enough. I don't think it is. You can access the health app sort of unrestricted once you're into the phone. But hey, if customers start asking for it, then maybe it's something I'll look at adding as an option, but definitely not for the first version. Now, it's also common for apps these days to lock some kind of content or features behind a paywall of some kind. But But generally, you want to give customers a way to preview or demo this experience before they commit to signing up or subscribing or whatever it is you're trying to get them to do. Now, you might offer a sample of the features or a bit of a preview, maybe you play a video for them, maybe you give them a free trial for 3 days, 7 days, a month, however long it is. It's just something that you have to consider when you're building your application. And it's generally easier to make decisions like this early on, and then you can structure your application as such. So in the case of Glucomate, there are certain features that are restricted behind a paywall. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the app has a full demo mode. So someone should be able to open the app, get a feel, like an unrestricted feel for what the app can do with completely fake data. So not really going to get much value out of the data that they see, but it should be enough for them to make an assessment on, hey, is this helpful for me? Widgets are really popular on iOS these days, particularly apps that are data heavy or offer like timely information would really benefit from making this available on the home screen, the lock screen. And ideally, these will be customizable. So you can allow parameters to be configured, adjust values, things like that. It makes for a really nice experience when an app does this. It's not in Glucomate at the moment, but it's definitely a feature I want to add. It's simply just a time constraint why it didn't make day one. And then very similar to the previous slide, but complications on Apple Watch. Same thing, especially around like really timely real-time information. It's great to have access to that on your wrist in a complication. And the other thing complications are great for is just sort of quick access to an app. So if there's an app that someone is using a few times a day, they might want to put a complication on their watch face that doesn't do anything. It could be your app's logo, it could be a quick action button, but it gets them into your app really fast. And that's also something I know people like. Similar story, no complications in Glucomate just yet, but something for the future. Now, this one's particularly for video focused apps, but picture-in-picture and SharePlay are two critical features, I think, for most apps that would have be centered around video these days. So customers expect to be able to do other things while they're watching video in your application, especially on an iPhone. It's very rare that I would be watching something. It'd be very rare to watch a video on my iPhone at all, but if I am, I'm probably not giving it my whole attention. It's nice to be able to flick into, respond to a message or look at an email or something like that while the video continues to play. It's also trivial to support picture-in-picture if you're using standard AV player stuff. Like, there's really no good reason not to these days. And then the same is true for SharePlay, but to a lesser extent. It's a nice to have, but it's probably not essential, but it can make for a really nice experience if someone happens to be on a FaceTime call. So again, none of these are relevant, or neither of these are relevant to Glucomate, but they are something I wanted to call out because I know it really bugs me when apps don't do this. Now, localization is also something that customers will expect and that you should consider. So, frankly, most of the world doesn't speak English, and it could be hugely beneficial to you or your business to make your app available in more markets. But there's more to localization than just strings. I know strings are generally the first thing that comes to mind for me anyway, but there's also things like colors and support for right to left orientation, so making your views compatible with that, or deciding to opt a view out of that if it's not appropriate. Now, there's no denying it can slow development time, but there are upsides and you should definitely consider it. So how does Glucomate handle localization? Well, at launch, it's translated into 6 languages and do some things around changing colors in regions where sort of the standard things that we're used to in the English world don't translate. Siri support is another big one. So Siri is evolving fast, especially what we can do with it as developers. I feel like there's something new every year, no matter how big or small, there's always something. But it gives customers a way to interface with your app outside of just the hardware that's in their hand. So being able to interface with a HomePod or an Apple TV or something through Siri, that's quite unique. And it does give people a way to do that. Then there's also the sort of angle of Siri support through shortcuts, which allow you to sort of chain actions together or run quick actions when it's convenient. That's also a whole other world and I know a lot of people are very passionate about that, and for certain people, it's critical that an app supports that before they will use it. It's also worth noting that basic Siri support is pretty simple. It's a matter of, assigning a query to something and returning a view basically with whatever data it is. You just get some processing time and then you just render it on the screen. Nothing in Glucamate just yet because of, well, time constraints similar to widgets, but I'd actually really like to do some sort of high quality stuff with Siri around, asking it for stats or averages, trends and things like that. And I think being able to return some UI and show that is hugely beneficial as well. And then there's the whole shortcuts angle of being able to calculate a reading or an average and pass it down and do something with it. Maybe you email it to somebody every Friday or something like that. I don't know. But there's lots of options there. So the final expectation that your customers might have that I wanted to talk about is dark mode. Now, dark mode is an accessibility feature, but it's not just an accessibility feature. There are people who prefer it and run their phone in dark mode all the time. It can be really jarring if you're running your phone in dark mode to open an app that doesn't support it. And just because you designed your app to look really good in light mode, that's great, but customers want it in dark mode when their phone is in dark mode. So just something to consider. So I went through all of those really quickly, but that's sort of an overview of what it kind of takes to build a good iOS app these days. I realized like half of them I said I don't have them in Glucamate yet, and I'm talking about launching an app, but it is what it is. I'm trying to get there, but these are the things that come to mind when thinking about a good app and sort of things that customers might expect. But then there's a whole bunch of other things. So you finished your app, you've added all these really cool features and extensions and support for all of that fancy stuff. But what else do you need to consider between sort of finishing the code and getting it onto the App Store? Well, a good starting point is like test flight, beta testing. You could beta test with another service, but I think most people would be using test flight these days. So it's really important to get your app into the hands of others. I guarantee you they're going to find things you didn't think about, be it issues or use cases for something that you just hadn't considered. And the only way to really find those out is to put it in front of other people. And start the process as early as possible and use the time to improve your app. So it's not the best idea to send out a test flight beta 3 days before you want to go live on the App Store. Like, try and do it a few weeks before and allow yourself enough time to improve and sort of integrate the feedback that people give you. Another consideration is monetization. When practicing for the talk, I realized I don't know how to say that word. I'm not even going to try again. Look, there's so many ways you can do this. You could have a completely free app, and that's fine. You could have a paid app, have a freemium app, a subscription app. You could use ads. It's perfectly fine to not monetize, but you just need to make a decision. And it actually helps to make the decision as early on as you can, because again, it's going to impact how you structure your app. If certain features are hidden behind a paywall, it's not impossible, but it's more difficult to retrofit that than it would be to sort of design with that from the beginning. And you can also then design how you're going to try and approach the upsell feature. Make it part of the experience, not just a jarring paywall. If you do go down the in-app purchase or subscription route, you need to remember to submit them for review through App Store Connect. So at the same time that you're submitting your app binary to review, you need to sort of add them to the review process separately. But otherwise, you might launch an app and your store kit isn't returning anything in the production version of the app, and that's not a great situation to be in. Another consideration, and depending on your launch or marketing strategy, might be App Store pre-orders. You have to decide if this is applicable to your app, and if it is, don't forget to check the checkbox in App Store Connect. Analytics is another consideration. So the first question around analytics should be, do you need them? A lot of apps don't, or they need a lot less than they have. But if you do need them, figure out what needs to be tracked, and then try and decide what service is going to best sort of fit your needs. Like I mentioned, don't collect more than you need. Privacy can be an advantage these days, and I generally recommend collecting less than you need. In the case of Glucamate, I use a service called Telemetry Deck. It's super lightweight. It doesn't add any bloat to my app because it's basically just making a bunch of HTTP calls to a server, and I've written that layer myself. Like I'm not even bringing in their SDK. It's just kind of one file that's firing off really basic requests, and it's all around general usage of the app. Of course, no like personal data is being sent, or no glucose levels or anything like that is being tracked. It's more about what tab are people visiting, or where are they finding the most value in the app? Are they seeing the subscription screen? Things like that. Another consideration, privacy policy and terms. So every app now needs a privacy policy, I'm pretty sure. And terms of use are also a good idea. You don't have to have them, I don't think, but yeah, generally a good idea. No one likes doing this. I especially don't, but I don't really have anything to say. I can't make any recommendations. Maybe get a lawyer if you want. But yeah. Another thing to consider is App Store screenshot automation. So firstly, you need to work out if you need it. Again, if you only support like maybe 1 or 2 languages and you only want screenshots for a couple of devices in each language, it's probably going to be faster to take the screenshots yourself, even if you need to do any like positioning or framing, things like that. But if you support a bunch of languages, if you want to take your screenshots across multiple devices, then it is going to be easier and faster in the long run to automate it. There's a bit of an upfront cost, like a time cost, but once you get it set up, it's generally pretty smooth. So I use Fastlane for Glucomate to handle the 6 languages and 4 iPhones and 1 Apple Watch size. But once you get this set up, it does make it really easy to support multiple languages. And adding a language and taking screenshots for it is a breeze. Another consideration, and again, depends on sort of the marketing and launch strategy of your app, is you might want to do a press kit. What is a press kit? Well, first you need to sort of think about who your target audience is. Who are the people that you would like to speak about your app, write about your app, blog, whatever it might be, and then build them a sort of contained download file with all this information. So it can have things like screenshots are very important. Launch dates, information about the developer, information about the app, what sets it apart, those kind of things. Anything that you think could be relevant to sort of someone influential who you're trying to get to write about your application. You might not need one, but it can be good to have. And then on a similar note, contacting the press. So you got to get the word out somehow, and people aren't going to know about your app or your service, whatever it is, if you don't tell them. I'd suggest trying to make it interesting. Maybe you're telling a story, maybe give them a reason to share it. Explain how it will help them, or why it's unique, or why only you can do this, or something like that. And admittedly, it's very scary. It's kind of weird to just email people that you don't know and say, hey, I think you should write about my thing. But it can work, and yeah, definitely worth a shot anyway. It's their job. They're not going to be annoyed if you only email them once, but it's definitely worth it. And then similar to all of this like press kit marketing stuff, it's good to have a website, and this is more for your customers or your potential future customers. But it can be a place to direct people. It's sort of one central location for people to learn as much as possible about the app and why they would benefit from it or why they should use it. And yeah, it's just, and you can do other things there that you might not be able to do with like an app store listing. So for example, if you had an email list or something like that, you can't exactly put that field in an app store listing, but you can put it on a website. So again, collect data with caution, but if that's something you want to do, then you have to do it through a website. And the final sort of tip in preparing for launch that I would suggest is letting Apple know. So Apple has this great form, and most of you probably know about it, but some of you might not, at appstore.com/promote. And they really encourage third-party developers to fill it out whenever they're launching something new or whenever they're launching a major update to an existing product. I can't emphasize this enough. Fill it in. Take the time, fill it in well, and submit it with plenty of notice. I think the form asks for like 3 or 4 weeks notice or something like that. And similar to like writing to the press, filling this in is a way to let Apple know about your app. Potentially it'll be featured, maybe not, but again, you don't know until you try. And like Apple says this themselves, but fill it in with every major update or something that's noteworthy, because it might let somebody know about your app who you'd like to put it in front of. So that's all I have for tonight. So like real quick crash course in the things that I've done over the last 2 months to get things ready for launch. You can learn more about Glucomate at the website, see what in there, or by just searching for it in the App Store. And are there any questions?
Excellent talk, Zach. Thank you. Couple of questions. One, just the side effect from Melbourne CocoaHeads, where there was a really good talk last week about a specific app that they had some notes that about 40% of their users, which is an in-house, were using dark mode. So that was sort of an interesting, that also came up. But I was also a little bit curious on how you are making some of the decisions about what the weight is about. Do I do a press kit, or do I put the effort into a widget, or just the effort decision somewhere? I mean, it's a different thing when it's a commercial app with 50 people involved, but when it's a small indie, just any thoughts?
It's a good question. It's one of the luxuries of working on your own thing. You know, it doesn't have to make money. You can make these decisions sort of spur of the moment. In my case, it's not so calculated. It's kind of what I have time for and what I want to work on as well. So for this app, I did prepare a press kit, and that was because I thought it looked really good. And like, I thought it would be fun to prepare this. I've never done it for an app before. And so that was something I wanted to put my time into instead of a widget. And, you know, the widget will come, but I've built widgets before and they're really cool, but you know, it wasn't the new novel thing. So I built a press kit. Like, just, I don't know. It's not a calculated business thing as such, but it's, yeah, deciding will be fun. And, you know, because if you're working on this thing in like the evenings and the weekends, it's got to be fun. You're not going to stick with it if it's not. Yeah.
About the initially, I was about to ask about the icon, but then the whole layout and designs. Did you build it yourself, or just for help?
Yeah, but that was part of the reason it took so long, because I have no like natural design ability, and so it was literally like, make a change. Is this better than it was before? Yes or no, kind of, you know, go down that path, and then eventually it turns into something that looks good. But like, I couldn't sit down and come up with that in a few hours. Like, it literally took years. Yeah.
Just another one. You didn't mention backend. Is it the whole thing only works in the app, or do you have a backend built yourself?
Only in the app. So it's using HealthKit for its data source. So it's, you know, writing to that in an offline way. The analytics service is obviously server dependent, but like I you know, it's sending a request. If it fails, it fails. I don't get the event. I don't really care. And then the other thing that you'd normally need, or you used to need a backend for, is like receipt validation for subscriptions, but it's using StoreKit 2, which lets you do the validation on device, and they actually give you a little indication of, is this like, does this seem like a legitimate transaction, or is it potentially faked? And then you just sort of decide which level of thing you're going to trust. But again, that doesn't need your own server anymore, whereas you used to have to send a receipt and validate it. So no, completely offline, which is actually really nice, coming from Petty, where every now and then I get a little ping on my phone that lets me know I need to go reboot a server, and I don't love that. So yeah.
And just share my experience. So the quick win is to ask ratings.
Yeah.
So because it's like 1,000 users, and it will be 3 stars review from 10 of them, because only unhappy ones will return. So, and once you ask the rating, it will be hundreds of 5 stars.
Yeah.
But precisely choose the moment, because when application asks me on the run, it's like, as it says, a rating, and the train is there. So
1 star, miss my train. Yeah. No, that's a good point, actually. I've seen many apps benefit from that. Yeah, especially if you time it right, it can be a big win.
You may have kind of already answered my question by saying you've been working on this for years, but someone that, like, I've had so many side projects that I solve all the difficult problems and then lose interest, and they just never see the light of day. You know, you got something like, what motivates you to do that last 10% or whatever it may be.
So I was using it. I think that's a big one. So even if in its terrible state where it looked like a toddler designed it, like I was still opening it to get this, all the same stats that you see there today were there, just didn't look good. And then the other thing, which I think I mentioned in the talk, was Swift charts last year. So it was in a state where I had a few things, like a few of the charts designing, and there's probably like 8 or 9 different charts in the app. And I knew what I wanted a few of them to look like, but I had no idea what the others needed to look like in order to look polished. And just sort of being having a reason to play around with Swift charts was motivating enough to go on to finish it. Yeah.
Is this available in Mac or iPad, any other platforms?
No, because the iPhone's the only device you can access HealthKit on. So, and the Apple Watch. So it doesn't make sense to make it available on the other platforms because you won't get any readings.
I was just going to mention that for me, it was a surprise with my app that once I switched to support Mac, for instance, which the first one was iPad, the intention, all of a sudden, 2 months later after the release on Mac, 60 or 70% of my users are on Mac, and it's racing. So it's a good market to look into.
Oh, that's interesting. Good to know.
So Zach, are you aware of anyone famous who might have come across your app and potentially written about it?
Pointed question.
This morning, John Gruber.
Sorry, I had to say that again.
Yeah, John Gruber. Just a small indie Mac.
You know what's that?
Yeah, might have published a few words about it.
Yeah, well done, by the way. That's amazing.
What are your thoughts on app clips? And do you think it's also part of the things to have?
Yeah, that's a good one. I honestly didn't think about it, but yeah, I'd say so. Again, depending on the app. I think a lot of those, ordering apps that you got during COVID, like they're a perfect example for an app clip. And so, yeah, I think if your app is something that's going to be used in like a fleeting moment and you're never going to have to use that app again, then an app clip's perfect for that. Why keep the thing on your phone forever? Yeah.
How did you feel to have your app in 6 languages? Do you speak 6 languages? Just ask a question.
I used ChatGPT. I ran the translations for a certain language by a friend, and he's like, "This is like 95% right." And so that gave me a bit of confidence actually to bump up the languages a little bit more. And there's some languages that haven't been looked at by anyone, so I don't know what that says. But just from from talking to him and sort of running some of the other languages back through Google Translate, I was confident enough. I figure you can run it in English if it's terrible. And if it's so bad that you love the app, you might write in and help me fix it. So, I don't know.
But that's true in general language translation. I mean,
Yeah,
we had stuff in Spanish, and then we had an employee who was South American Spanish and went, "No, that's completely the wrong term."
Yeah, and I know a lot of people who use those services, and they say it's not great either. And so that's the risk you take, I guess.
Professional service.
yeah.
I don't think they get the 95.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. The translation came back from my friend. He changed 5 words or something.
GPT gave a 95% answer.
Yeah.
Said it was 95% accurate. So, of course, it's right.
All right, cool. Just one more.
Just reading John Gruber's thing on you. Are you worried you'll get Sherlocked by Apple Watch that will read your blood glucose?
No, this would work nicely with that. So, my thoughts on that are, so firstly, I would happily destroy this app and take an Apple Watch that can monitor my blood sugar, because as someone with diabetes, that would be
Major.
way more important than an app. But I also think that if that does happen, then this app is well suited to being there for people. At the moment, it's really only useful for someone who monitors their blood sugar, and you're only going to do that if you have diabetes, or you might be pre-diabetic or something like that. Most people aren't monitoring their blood sugar, but if everyone in this room was wearing an Apple Watch that monitors their sugar, at some point you're going to want to look at that data. I look at my heart rate data, even though I don't have a heart problem, but it's interesting to analyze it because the watch is recording it almost 24 hours a day. So I think it just increases potential amount of people who are interested in the app. And like HealthKit's great, it's a great app, but generally they're not going to go into the more detailed trends and stuff. Like it provides a surface level analysis of things. But if you want to drill down, then that's, I think, really where a third-party app can shine. So not worried about Sherlocking, but
And
if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
it's a huge user base.
Yeah, so yeah, it's probably all. But yeah, all right, thanks everyone.
The elephant in the room, which is support.
You
didn't cover that.
Anyway.
I spent the train ride here answering emails, and that was a lot. That felt like a lot. And they were all English ones, so I have no idea how I'm going to handle support in other languages. I'll work that out when the time comes. English
the money
support,
rolling?
Look, if I have so much support that I'm drowning, it's probably a good problem to have. Like, I don't think that's really.
It's not.
But
Unless it's because 90% people raise a complaint, that's a different issue.
well, you know, help. No, seriously, if like push came to shove, doing things like where you don't direct them to immediately send an email, but you have frequently asked questions and you have sort of almost like a phone tree that you need to get through before you can send an email. Doing that is an option.
I can give you a couple tips.
I was going to ask you separately how you handle support in other languages.
It's really good.
Yeah, okay.
And you can just include some diagnostics in the supporting.
Yeah.
And then talk about that privacy.
And then read through it. No, it's not. Mine's 100% private. I don't do anything. You just put some metadata in the support email, and then you can put some intelligence in there, and it gives them some problem solving, that sort of stuff.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
Well, I went from 250 emails a day to about 20. So
yeah, that's
You find the delete preference.
I kind of hope I'm never at 200 emails. That's all.
If they're all thank yous, it's good.
Sure. Cool. All right. So that also wraps up CocoaHeads for April.
A little bit of housekeeping.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Get out.
Yeah. No, that's all right.
So, two things that came up. Obviously, I've got lots of questions. I'm definitely gonna rewatch that talk because I did all that and it flopped. So I need to do it right. And that was a really good summary that I wish I had, I don't know, 2-3 years ago. So I've noticed two things. So one, food, it's really hard to sort of judge how many are gonna show up. And I noticed we ran out of food. So I hope you already do it, but if you are intending to show up as early as possible, RSVP a meetup, thumbs up in Slack, anything that can help us, know how many
one source of truth,
meetup, sure.
Yeah.
And also be a little bit, considerate. Don't take a whole pizza for yourself. I haven't noticed that, but I'm just saying, leave a little bit for everyone else. One thought I had, so one, you mentioned the Fastlane screenshot thing. That's actually a talk I've intended to do sometime. And I thought if they're actually, first of all, sure, who's interested in that? That's enough. And I wondered if we have the case where a lot of people sit back with questions or ideas and think, I would really actually like to hear more about this, but I'm not going to do a talk myself or something. In Slack, if there is a specific topic or a new thing, post it there, say, hey, I'd really like to hear about this. We might do a talk about it. Someone else might pick it up and say, okay, I know about that. We can sort of keep the community going and we, keep the amount of talks inflowing. If you do want to do a talk, it's entirely open. We've got there's a form somewhere in Slack, I'm sure, where you can sign up.
There is a form on the website. It's a little bit out of date. If you're in Slack, it's probably better to send one of us a message directly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just let's get the flow going. Like we want to also find, we do get some talk, but we also want to find some that's like relevant to what's going on currently or what people actually want to hear about. So please give us your feedback. And yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.